in Rust, and it has some very interesting parameters that we'll check out today. So in this video, we'll mostly be looking at the chapter itself. So I don't have any slides or anything prepared for this. So we'll take a look at what the chapter entails, right? And then we'll go from there. So if you see the description given over here, ownership is Rust's most unique feature, as I already mentioned. And one of the primary advantages of Rust is that it's memory safe, right? So this ownership feature is what enables Rust to make memory safe guarantees without needing a garbage collector, right? So it's important to understand how ownership works. We'll come back to ownership probably back and forth after a couple of chapters, and I highly recommend to refresh the concept. But here we'll just get started by looking at what this concept means, right? Before we go to ownership, it is important to understand how the stack memory and the heap memory functions, right? So I know that if you're using many scripting languages like Python, right, we don't really have to worry that much about the stack memory or the heap memory, but it would be good to refresh this concept. I would definitely link in a video link that will help you, go back to your basics and understand a little bit about what is stack memory and what is heap memory, right? So what is ownership and what does it mean in Rust, right? So if you think about ownership as an umbrella concept, right? Every variable that we create, every instance of a variable that we create will have some ownership throughout the program, right? It occupies some memory, right? So it is being stored somewhere, it needs to be accessed from memory. All of these operations are happening. So especially in the context of advanced technologies like blockchain, it is very important to understand what is being created when, stored in memory when, and what is being destroyed when, right? And how is the destruction happening? So if you think about scope of a variable, and in that context, you can think of ownership from that perspective, right? So as mentioned here, ownership is a fairly new concept for many programmers. So it takes some time to get used to, so don't worry about it. You can just go through the chapter with me right now and then come back to it whenever you would like to refresh, right? So before we, like I said, before we go to what are the ownership rules, it is important to know what is stack and what is heap. I will link a video that might be useful to you. So when we think about ownership, right, let us look at the primary rules of ownership, right? There are 3 ownership rules. Each value in Rust has a variable that's called its owner, right? We look at variable scope in the next section, but understand that each value has an owner, right? There can be only one owner at a time. A particular value cannot be owned by more than one entity, right? And when the owner goes out of scope, the value will be dropped, right? So when we talk about scope, what is variable scope in Rust? Let us take a look. So I'm sure you would have seen the previous programs, previous videos, or gone through the previous chapters, right? Here we have kind of missed the chapter 2 in my video series, but you can always go back and take a look. But we are just using basic syntax, so I'm sure you should be fairly familiar with that, like using function main, for example, in code examples to write the main functions, right? So we'll use the basic boilerplate code that we have been using so far. Okay, so let us take with the examples that are given here, let us take a look at the scope of some variables, right? So what is scope? A scope is the range within which a program for which that particular variable, item, instance, whatever you would want to call it, is valid. So how long does that variable live? That's what is meant by the scope, right? So if we have, for example, a variable called s, right, which is assigned the value hello, right? Here the variable s refers to a string literal, where the value of the string is hard-coded, right, into the text of the program. The variable is valid from the point at which it's declared until the end of the current scope, right? Now, as you can see from the comments here, let us see what is the current scope of this variable. So given that this variable is defined anywhere in your program within these two brackets, right? There is an open curly braces and a closed curly braces. So if you want to copy paste this, this could be like a main function that you could experiment with, right? So you say function main and then open, close, right? Inside your main function, this is what is written. So when the curly braces start, S is not valid here because it's not yet been declared, right? Once S is declared, it is valid only from this point forward, right? Now we can do stuff with S. We can use it to print. We can use it in a program. We can use it to combine with other variables and perform some action or whatever we are doing, right? And once we close the curly braces, the scope of this variable is now over and it is no longer valid, right? So if you see the two important points that are mentioned here, when S comes into scope, it is valid. It remains valid until it goes out of scope. So it comes to scope here, right? Once the braces have been closed, right? Because it's declared under curly braces. Once the braces have been closed, it goes out of scope, right? So now let us build on top of this by introducing the string type, right? So we studied some basic data types in the common programming concepts. We have not studied string in depth, right? But here we want to, as they have mentioned here in the chapter 8, we'll be studying string in depth, right? We have seen string literals where string value is hard coded, but these are not convenient when we want to create our own strings, right? So if you see, these are immutable, right? The ones that we saw, the string literals, right? So we have another type in string type in Rust called string, that is starting with capital S, right? And this type of variable is allocated on the heap. So it is dynamically allocated, right? And therefore it is able to store an amount of text that is unknown to us at compile time. So for example, if you want to create a variable, right, where you are not sure what is going to be the string, right? So you are only taking an input from the user, for example. If you want to print hello world and the user's name, right? So you take the name from the user as the input. So you're not aware at the beginning what is going to be the size of the user's name, right? It could be a long name, it could be a shorter name, right? In that case, we create these type of variables which are allocated on the heap and can be given even if they can be created even if the amount of text is unknown to us at the compile time, right? So how do we create a string from a string literal? We use a function called from, right? So here our string literal is the word hello. From here, we are creating a string called S using the function from, right? So the double colon mentioned here is an operator that is just like a namespace operator. So it allows us to namespace the particular from function under the string type rather than using some sort of name like string underscore from, right? So this from is from the string type. So it says create a string heap allocated string type from this string literal hello, right? So we'll discuss more of this under method syntax in chapter 5, where we talk about struct, right? There is where we'll talk a little bit more about namespacing, right? And then there is, of course, more as mentioned in chapter 7. So now this kind of string can be mutated. This is a very, very important point to note, right? That this kind of string can be mutated. All right. So now what we are going to do is, if you see the code here, we create a mutable string called hello, right? And then we want to change, we want to obviously mutate the string, we want to change something. So we are going to use the function push underscore str, which appends another string literal, comma, world, exclamation mark, to our already created string variable s, right? So we say s dot push underscore str, and now s is hello world, right? So if you print s, it is hello world. So the what is the biggest difference between string literals, right? That is the string data type that we saw earlier. Let me see if I can quickly go to this chapter. Boolean type, character type, right? So character type had different characters, right? As you can see. Okay, so here are you have okay, I'm just trying to see if I can find string literals defined anywhere in our earlier chapters. Yeah, so if you see this, right, if we store this hello world into a string, that is nothing but a string literal, right? So, whereas the string that we are looking at is completely different. Now, let's see, as mentioned here, what is the difference between a string literal and this string that we are creating using the string, the capital string functionality, right? So the primary difference is how these two types deal with memory, right? As I already mentioned, there are two different types of memory, stack memory and heap memory, right? You can always go back and read on that. Heap memory is where we use for dynamic allocation. That is, even if we are unaware of what is going to be the size of that particular variable or something, we can always use heap memory to allocate that once it is taken. Allocate a amount of memory on the heap, not on the stack, right? So this memory is unknown at compile time, right? And we need some memory that is allocated to hold the contents. So this memory must be requested from the memory allocator at runtime. This is one of the most important points to note here, right? That whenever we are allocating memory dynamically, it must be requested from the memory allocator at the runtime. And once that memory allocator returns something, we need a way of returning this memory to the allocator when we are done with our string. So the memory allocator gives us some memory, right? And once we are done with this variable, we need to return it back to this memory allocator. So when we call the string from, right, it requests the memory, right, which is how we do. But in most of the programming languages, if you see, we have to either use some kind of functionality like free, or we have to manually deallocate the memory, right? But in Rust, it is a different path altogether. The memory is automatically returned once the variable that owns it goes out of scope. So if we create S over here, right, its scope starts here, it is valid from here. Once the scope of this S is over, as we have seen just a bit earlier, once the brackets are closed, the scope is now over and the variable S is no longer valid. So Rust is taking care for us that the ownership is automatically terminated without the need for us to call explicitly a function to free that memory. Even though we have requested for that memory during runtime, when the scope is over, we are automatically the memory is returned back, right? So when a variable goes out of scope, Rust calls a special function for us. That function is called drop. And it's where the author of string can put the code to return the memory. Rust calls drop automatically at the closing curly bracket. So when we close the curly bracket, the function drop is already called. So this is one of the simplest examples of how Rust implements ownership, or how ownership rules are implemented in Rust, right? In the next video, we'll take a look at what are the different ways variables and data interact, right? So when one variable is declared to another variable, then how does the memory or ownership rules work? So that is where we have a move. We also have something like, let me just go down. We have clone, right? What happens, how do the rules change, and how does the memory change when a particular variable is cloned, right? When one variable is cloned for another. What happens during copy, right? All of these we will see in the upcoming video. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you for watching the first part of Chapter 4, Ownership. We have a lot to discuss in ownership as it's a slightly deeper concept. I've decided to split it into smaller videos so you're able to go through the chapter as I am going through the chapter as well. Go through it along with me and understand it better. Thank you so much once again. And if you